Prashant, how are you?
Yeah. Hi, I'm good. What about you?
Okay, Prashant, let's start with the introduction.
Okay, yeah. So I completed my BTech in the year 2019 from Dronacharya College of Engineering in CSIT branch. Then from the starting, at starting, I started working with Node.js with Maruti Suzuki as a client. There I worked on like some ERP related applications mainly, like some payroll ERP and some attendance management systems and some supply chain systems too, like for importing and for all the vendor information basically. So the tech stack that I worked on there was like at starting I worked with like the Node.js as a backend, and the database that I used at the starting was the Oracle. In the like Oracle, I was writing the like procedures packages in the PL SQL and like connecting them with the Node.js for the backend APIs basically. Then like again, if moving to some next projects, I started working with like the MongoDB too. The database that I used as MongoDB, and the backend was same with the Node.js. And I also then worked on some front-end technologies like with the React. I started working with the React too. In the React, like I worked on some creating some UI pages, some front-end pages, and like writing the application logic in them. Then I also worked on some with the Node. I worked on the Nest.js too, with the TypeScript basically for and the database that I used was the same MongoDB, and the ORM that I used is the SQLized ORM, and I switched to the Reliance Geo. There I worked on some chat-based application that is the GeoMeet. It is similar to like this Google Meet or Microsoft Teams application used for one-to-one and one-to-many video chatting basically. My role in that application was mainly as a backend developer. I worked on enhancing the new services and like creating the new services and to scale up the old API services that were used in that application. Then I worked on two projects from the scratch. One is the geo coupon system that I worked on. The backend was is the mainly in the Nest.js, and the front end was in the React. My mainly focus was on the backend, and I also worked on some front end part in that application. And the other one was the Geo Payment Bank, in which I created the backend APIs and also worked on some front end applications part. And since last year, I've been working with Sky, and here I'm working as a full stack developer too. And the backend that I'm using here is the Node.js with TypeScript, and the front end is with the ReactJS. And the current project that I'm working on, is a supply chain project basically, in which the customer fills in their required data, and it will go on approving to the required person, and like some notifications are sent to them, and based on that, like user can get the head admin can generate some reports and basically view some charts in the application.
Okay. Prashant, particularly with Node, what is your experience?
Like from starting, I've been working with Node mainly.
So how much should I count? 3, 4?
Can count like around 4.5.
Okay. And as you mentioned, you have worked on React as well, right?
Yes.
So what is your experience with React?
Like in the React, I start with some different with some different projects I worked on with React over this time. Can say like 4.
Okay. So Prashant, with Node, on which framework you have worked on?
Express, and also with like the Nest, I have also worked on.
Okay, so with Express, you worked on how much projects? Sorry, Nest. With the Nest, what is the time? How many projects you have done on the Nest?
3 projects like from scratch. 2 projects like from scratch, and one was already I joined that project.
Okay. Okay. And on which database you have worked on other than Oracle?
MySQL, Postgres, and with the Node.js, with NoSQL, I work with MongoDB.
Okay. And what is the experience with MongoDB?
Let's say like the same for.
Okay. 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 Prashant, can you tell me the difference between promise and a callback function?
Promise and a callback function. So promise is simple object, like I can say, like if I write some promise, so this when I call this promise, this will returns me a simple object that is a pending promise, uh, and that this promise states that currently I'm in a pending state, and after some time it will either be like rejected or resolved in the future time, based on whatever we pass, whatever condition is there. And the callback is a simple function that is used to handle some synchronous tasks. Basically, it will we can pass it in some timer function or some function pass to some other function, and it then performs our task after that period of time. Uh, Basically,
Okay. Prashant, if I ask you to choose between promise and a callback, which should be the ideal one to be used?
promise.
Any particular reason?
Like suppose there are multiple there are some multiple functions in our application that we need to pass in the callback. So like we are passing, like suppose a callback, then return b callback, then return c, then return 3. It can be like become some like much of the task, basically, to handle them. And the promise, we can perform all of them at once, basically, like the promise dot then, or like with the promise dot all settled, basically, to perform all the promises in the sequences.
Okay. Prashant, can you explain me what is callback hell?
um, Codec hell is the same phenomena that I tell you. Like suppose there is a function A that is returning function B, and then it is returning uh, over so on, like A to function A returning B, and then over so on to function G. Like in every function it is returning some other function, basically. So this is the like the callback hell.
Okay. Prashant, if I ask you, async await works synchronously or asynchronously?
Async await asynchronously, like it will wait for the functions synchronously.
Synchronously.
Yes.
Okay. Prashant, can you tell me what is the middleware?
Middleware is something. Suppose there is our in our application there are some APIs which are required to be authenticated, basically. Uh, so in that API we have to check that the token value that is passed in that API is valid or not valid. So one thing that we can do is either to write the same logic in all in all the API, like if token equal to 123, then pass, or either it will return error. So one thing this I can do, but but this we have to do in all the APIs. So rather than this, what we can do is we can create one middleware that will be called as soon as the API request comes in our application. So before reaching our main controller function, it will the API request will go to that middleware, and if it will get passed, it will move to the next if there's next API or next middleware.
Okay. So is it only about authentication or something else?
Not authentication, like anything that we need to perform check before our controller function. Like if we need to check body of our the body of our REST API, if it's in correct format, or some if we are passing some file to the API, so need to download that file basically with the help of some middleware. Anything that we need to perform or make it some common, we can use it as a middleware.
Okay. Prashant, have you worked on Redis?
Redis, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What was the purpose you were using Redis for?
So let's say I have one API in which I'm getting the data of all the users basically. And whenever I'm calling that API, it is giving most of the time same data. And every time whenever I'm calling the API, it is calling the db.user, making some database call. So in order to perform make the API more optimized, I can do one thing, like we can add we can, whenever we get the data from the database, we can store it in Redis, and we can check if the data is available in Redis, we can simply throw that data, we can simply return that data, or if it's not available, we can check for the data in database and then again store it in the Redis. And whenever we are updating or deleting, adding some new users, we can update the data in the Redis too.
Okay. Prashant, have you worked on socket.io?
Yes.
Okay. So what was the purpose you were using it for?
Used that in like two or three. The first application that I used, it was the mainly to like real time communication basically between the client and the server, like in order to chat and some real time streaming data that we need to send. So, I use that in the Geomit application, in which we are performing the chatting system and the notification system basically. Suppose I add some reaction in this, like Google Meet, there is a reaction column. So if I click on some reaction, so in order to pass that in the real time in all the users, we can pass this the as the we can pass this data in the socket, and it will be passed over to the all the clients.
Okay. Prashant, can you explain me how does we get real-time data by using socket.io?
In the socket, there so basically like there are two types, that depends on the socket types, whatever the types you are using, like either we are using the TCP type socket or the UDP. I worked with the UDP type sockets, that's the WS and the datagram. So in that socket, we have to create the server, and then on the socket, like ws dot on, and in that we will get the data of all the clients that are connected. And then there is a function called the receive, in which whenever we get some notification, we will get the data, we will receive the data in the b in the form, like whatever we are sending, like data, username, user ID basically, and the data message basically that we have sent from the from the client or any other client to server basically.
Okay, fine. Prashant, have you worked on microservices?
Yes.
Okay. Can you explain me why we use microservices instead of monolithic architecture?
Okay. So I use this microservice architecture, microservice for the same like this Geomit application. So in that application, there are some services that are running for uh, that are running continuously, and they are giving response in some seconds amount of time. So in order to reduce that, I created some microservices basically that will be run in some over period of time, like 10 seconds or 5 seconds of time, to give the meeting states basically and check everything. And they are not dependent on any monolithic service. They are running on their own. So basically, if there are multiple, if their application is large and depending on many resources. So to overcome that, we can use this microservices architecture basically, so that each service can rely on only one service basically, like uh, uh, database saving is one service, and data fetching is one service basically. So in order to enhance our application.
Okay. Other than speed, if I'm switching my application from monolithic architecture to microservices, other than that speed part, what are the other benefits that I get uh, moving to that
Mm,
microservices?
like the standard of our application basically improve. Like the each service will have suppose there are um, mm, suppose there is a one service that one class that is reading the data and also saving the data, so that can it will be more out of the when we in the monolithic, it like the same class is reading and saving the data. In the microservice, when we move, it will be like a single class that is reading the data only, and it is only like then there is other class, other service basically, that is uh, fetching the data basically, like the some each service mm, each service will have like its own purpose, and in order to communicate, we can make the in between call in the microservice.
Okay. Prashant, have you worked on Docker or Kubernetes?
Mm, yes, I have worked on the Docker.
Okay. What was the purpose you were using it for?
Basically like to uh, suppose to simple to all the dependency that I'm using in my application in my machine, so that they can be run on anywhere else machine too. Like there are suppose some dependencies that will run on one day. Suppose there's three environment: dev, UAT, and production. So if there are some dependencies that are running on the dev, but they will stop running on, there might be or might not run on the UAT environment. To overcome this, we can create one Docker image that will encapsulate all the dependencies that we are using. And whenever we create the new images, it will take all the dependency, and um, um, and then we can use it on any environment, because all the dependencies will be already present that in that Docker image only.
Okay. Prashant, have you worked on Kafka and RabbitMQ?
I have worked with RabbitMQ.
Okay. Can you explain me the purpose?
So RabbitMQ is a queue service basically, that we can perform at our backend. Suppose mm, we are uploading one file in our image file, in our some any type of file that is very large, and the file reading takes some 30-40 seconds of time. So either we can do like we can till we don't get the response, we can wait the client to check it. We don't send a response to the client. Or the other thing what we can do is, whenever we get the file, we return that the file is uploaded. uh, we can return the message that file is uploading, and then at the backend we can send it to the some queue. Like in the RabbitMQ, we can send it like the send message to queue, and then there is the receiver which checks our which whenever we in the queue, when it's get the message, it will we can write our function basically, whatever the thing we need to do, and it can perform the task.
Okay, it's fine. Prashant, if I ask you to create any application from scratch, um, how will you make it a secure application? What will you do for its security purpose?
Okay. So, like the security purpose, if we are sending some data from our backend to the front end, so we can send that in the form of cookies, and in the cookies we can add that the parameters to like the HTTP true and the same origin true. What it do is it in the client side it prevents our application from any accesses attack basically, by which uh, no one will be able to access the cookies from any JavaScript method. Like in the browser, if I type cookies dot get my cookie name, so I won't be able to get that because it is prevented from the accesses. And other thing that we can do is like for security purpose, basically in our applications we can add some authorizations method like JWT token or any other token basically. Bcrypts, I have worked with the JW token for the authorization purpose. Like as soon as the user logs into the application, we will send them two tokens, access and the refresh. The access token will be expired in some short amount of time, like the 10 or 15 minutes. And after that it is expired, we will the client has to make another request with the refresh token and will get another access token basically in order to access. And also like suppose our application has user ID and password system, so whenever we get the password, in order to save it in the database, we can save it using some type of hashing basically. Like bcrypt, with the bcrypt we can save the hash of the password, and whenever we are checking the password we can check that the hash of the incoming password matching to the database password basically.
Okay, fine. Prashant, what do you understand by code reusability, and how do you apply it in your application to make it optimized?
Okay. Code usability simply like if suppose there are mm, some functions. Suppose in our application there can be multiple times where we have to call the database. So instead of calling database, like suppose if I write function A, uh, get data, in that data I'm writing like await users dot get data. So instead of writing this, whatever we can do is we can create some common type of function in which we can pass the arguments for the collection name and the query that we are passing. So we can just pass that one function in, we can use that simple one function in every time where we need to call the database, and with the like collection name and the database query that we need to perform. So suppose if we have 10 functions basically that are getting the data. So
Mhm.
previously if we have write like 10 function, 10 different function with a 10 different collection name, here our work can be done with simple one function basically to get the data. And also like anything where we need to breaking our function basically, if our function is very large, we can break it into simple multiple functions, and that can be reusable in any function that any other component that we are using in our application basically. So like this will also improve the coding standards our application, and like the readability too.
Okay. Prashant, what do you understand by MVC architecture?
It is the simple like the model view controller architecture, in which the business logic is writing in which we are the writing all the writing all the services in the different form. Like one service, in the one service there will be the one file, there will it will be handled for the sending our data basically. In one file there will be the only business logic, and in the one file there will only be the data that that is used to get and call that particular function. Basically, like we have to call one controller, and in that controller service, um, um, whenever our API is called into our application, and then it goes to the our controller function. In that controller function, we can suppose it has to do some calculation. We have to call that calculation function in from separate from our um, another function that is not dependent on that service, basically. And from that service, when we get the data, we can call another services in the sequence.
Okay, fine. Prashant, okay, do one thing. Share your screen and open any compiler, be it local, be it online, whichever you're comfortable with.
Wait a second.
Okay, Prashant, I have shared your text. Copy it in your compiler, then I will explain you what you have to do.